Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us on the Bloodline podcast by Precision Hunting Supply. My name is Paul, and my guest today is a friend, Officer Seth Shear from the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Not only a friend and a counterpart, but a customer of ours as well. We'll dive into that later. But otherwise, good morning, Seth. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on here.
We are excited to have you. You're the first conservation officer we've had on the podcast, and we're going to have some really, really interesting discussion, I think. So let's get started with telling us about yourself. Tell us about you, how you came into this career, and kind of bring us up to speed.
Absolutely. I grew up in the outdoors my entire life. I've always loved hunting. I've loved fishing. My dad, he was in the military, so we got to move around to a lot of different states. And one thing that always really stuck with me was my passion for hunting and fishing. So my dad ended up getting stationed out here in Arizona. He retired out here, and we just hunted and fished basically the entire time. It was like bonding activities, and it really grew on me professionally. Um, I'm really blessed. I got to hunt over in the East Coast. I got to hunt all over the U.S. and I really grew to love Arizona. That we really do have something special here, and being able to, you know, move from being a hunter and being a customer, and just being a ethical outdoorsman to becoming a game warden just ended up being a seamless transition for me. I was able to combine my passion for hunting and fishing to, my career, and really do think it's like the best job out there. I'll go ahead and start a little bit with my journey professionally. So, when I initially became or got into the game and fish, I actually started volunteering, and that was about like 2012 timeframe. I was fresh out of high school, and I was working at the time for like an engineering place that built some aircraft, and really had good money during then. Was earning good money working as a technician fresh out of high school, but realized I was missing something. And, you know, every time I got a free minute, I would be out fishing or I'd be out hunting. And I just thought to myself, how cool would that be to be able to, combine my two favorite things to do, and was able to, talk with a couple of people that were in game and fish, had a couple really good mentors that were game wardens, and they said, hey, why don't you look at becoming a game warden? And I was like, cool, yeah, sign me up. I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm going to hop right in. You give me a badge and a gun, I'm ready to rock and roll. And they're like, not that easy, not that easy. And, they informed me of some of the requirements for joining, which I know we'll probably touch on a little bit later. But ended up going to school, got my 4-year degree. While I was going to school, I was actually interning with the game and fish department as like a technician. I was a fisheries biologist or a fisheries technician. I was a creel survey. I did lots of electrofishing along some of the creeks up around Rim Country, around Payson, the Canyon Creek, Tonto Creek, East Verde, all that kind of stuff. And then later on during my college career, ended up getting into the terrestrial side of things, or like the big game side of things, and got to do some elk collaring projects. One of the biggest things I did was going around and collecting some GPS collars that fell off of some elk up around the Peaks area. So I was getting paid to go out and hike around in God's country and really, really just enjoy, being able to be in such a beautiful scenic area and not only get paid for it, but be able to really, really, go to some country that not really a lot of people get to go see. Um, After getting my degree and getting my internship, or finishing my internship, I ended up applying for becoming a wildlife manager. And of course, one of the big requirements, and we'll talk probably a little bit more in depth about it later. And I know Paul said that we could look at getting maybe like a little picture up of some of the degree requirements and different things that are required. But you have to have a 4-year wildlife related degree, and so that's typically a biology degree. Um, After you end up getting that degree, you are eligible to go ahead and apply. Again, one of the big things too is making sure you get that degree. That's the biggest hurdle that I talk with people about. But you get
And,
that
and your degree was in biology.
it was forestry
Your
and biology.
4-year.
Yep,
Okay.
forestry and biology.
Forestry and biology. What school did you go to for
I
that?
went to Northern Arizona University.
Okay. Yep.
Yep,
That's what I figured.
yeah,
Yeah.
up in the
Yeah.
beautiful pines. I loved it.
Yeah. Is that program and that degree offered at other state universities?
So it is at other states. As far as Arizona's, much as I know, it's the forestry degree is only offered at NAU, but there's
Right.
a
Not
lot.
not ASU or U of A.
Correct, correct.
GCU, those aren't state university. It's not a state university, but the other two state universities do not offer it. You got to go to NAU for that.
For the forestry degree, yep.
Yeah.
But of course, there's other job or other careers and degree paths you can do, like just regular biology, wildlife biology that U of A and ASU do have stellar programs for.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but yeah, ended up getting my degree. There's a pretty big application process in which you put in. You have to come out for some different testings. You'll have to go through a polygraph. You have a background check, physical fitness testing, psychology related stuff, making sure that you will be fit for duty. And as long as you pass through that, you interview well, you're going to be on your way to police academy. And that's where I started my journey. I still remember the date to this day, February 25th of 2019. So it's been 6.5 years basically since I started my career path of being a law enforcement officer for the department. Um, and I mean, you served as well in the public safety. You served as a fire captain for Mesa. Is that correct? And so,
Yeah, I was a retired as a battalion chief with Mesa, and then went to Superstition as their fire chief for 5 years. I started September 14th, 1992,
all right,
in the Mesa
you
Fire
remember the date.
Academy. I was 21 years old, and yeah, that was 35 years ago or so. I retired after 25 years.
Yeah, awesome,
We,
congratulations.
law enforcement has always had psych tests. Fire department didn't. I would not have had a career, I'm pretty sure, if there was a psych test. So, kudos to you for passing the hardest part of the exam.
Yeah, every now and then a loose link gets through, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they rise all the way to the position of fire chief even. Well, that's cool. Keep going. So
Yep,
bring us up to speed. So you start the academy. So you're getting a post certification, right?
yep.
And tell everybody what post stands for. And you're going to an academy with other law enforcement officers from around the state. Tell us about that.
Yep. So you have to go to an accredited police academy. Basically, you have to go through an Easy Post accredited academy, and that's so that way you can get your peace officer certification that's recognized and a requirement to become a peace officer in the state of Arizona. The place that I went to was Maricopa County's Law Enforcement Training Academy.
Okay.
There are a couple more throughout the state.
Mm-hmm.
We got, one in Phoenix. We have one in Tucson, one in Prescott, and there's a couple others that are offered through community colleges and other places as well.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple different city police departments as well that are offering their own in-house AZ postings that are accredited as well.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I remember it like it was yesterday, me showing up in my beautiful black and white suit and standing on that tarmac and just waiting for what was to come. And what ended up coming out was some super, I mean, crazy in shape guys. They had their uniforms freshly pressed. Everything was straight. They were clean. And I remember I shined my boots like religiously for weeks. And I was like, my boots are going to be the shiniest thing on that tarmac. And little did I know once I saw my instructors come out. And our instructors, I refer to them as RTOs. It's recruit training officers. It's what some people would probably think of like a drill instructor, basically, right? And so the RTOs, they came out fresh uniforms. All their boots are so super shiny, and I don't think I've ever seen the sky so clear flashing off of someone's boots before. But it made me feel like my boot was put to shame, and it was. It was.
Wow. So you thought you had shiny boots, but they paled
Oh,
in comparison.
oh,
Of course
one.
they did. Of
Yeah,
course they did. That's all part of the mind games, right?
absolutely.
You're not going to outshine their shoes. No way.
Yeah, but I remember going through, and I made a lot of really good friends. I went in with 6 other game wardens, so we had a class of 7 that we graduated from. We had officers from Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Hmm.
We had Gila County Sheriff's Office, Buckeye PD, Salt River PD, Peoria PD, and I'm probably forgetting 1 or 2 agencies, but we had a lot of agencies, like one big melting pot to become certified as peace officers in the state of Arizona.
How many wound up graduating that class?
So we started with 36. We graduated with 28. So we lost roughly a quarter, eight people
Yeah.
throughout the
Yeah.
duration.
Yeah. It's tough. It's not for everyone. And
No,
some people don't realize it till they get in there. And then there's always the issues of ethics and morals and all that kind of stuff that gets, challenged sometimes in that academy. So it's not uncommon to lose people. That's actually not that many from a lot of law enforcement academies to
Absolutely.
go from, what'd you say, 36 to 28. Not
Yep.
too bad. Yeah.
No, it really wasn't. And our academies when I went through, they were 24 weeks long, so it's roughly 6-ish months or so. And
Yeah.
during that time, you're going through really strict physical standards. I mean, you're running every day. You're making sure your uniform looks good every day. You're learning how to become a peace officer to deal with sometimes people's worst days, and that's your daily day. So they're training you how to become a cop, and they're getting you ready and prepared for being out in the field. So that 24-week period, we all became, what I would say is ready for the next step, getting our first introduction into law enforcement, and then we start a process that's called, at least for the game warden side, FTO, field training, and so
Right.
you
So
get
now you're
paired.
on probation. You're a probationary officer. You're paired up with a seasoned officer who also has a rank, title, and responsibility as a field training officer. So they're specifically assigned to train you and
Correct.
orient you to the field.
Yep, correct. So once you graduate, the way that it looked is, we get done with police academy, then we go into Arizona Ranger Training School, which is basically like a couple month process where you're getting trained on Title 17 specific. And just so the viewers know, Title 17 is Arizona revised statutes for wildlife related laws, fishing laws, etc. There's a bunch of different Arizona revised statutes. So like Title 13 would be criminal. Title 28 is like the civil traffic sort of things and sometimes criminal related things. But you'll hear me refer to Title 17 throughout this quite a bit. But they run you through a school that lasts approximately 2 to 3 months. They have a bunch of classes that get you familiarized with game and fish protocol, policy, report writing, utilizing their weapons, utilizing their vehicles, and that way you're ready when you go into the field. And that's called the field training portion. And so with game and fish, currently we have it set up so that way you're going to have 3 different field training officers. You'll have what's called a phase 1. You're with that officer for 3 weeks. Phase 2, you're with that officer for 3 weeks. And then phase 3, you're with that officer for 3 weeks as well. After you finish that phase with your third officer, you're going to go back to your first phase officer, and you basically finish 1 week with him. During that time, the officer that you're with is going to be in plain clothes. At least my officer was. They were in plain clothes, and they're looking like a ride along, and they're seeing how you function as a wildlife manager, because 90% of the time as a wildlife manager or a game warden, you're patrolling by yourself. So they want to make sure that you can take care of yourself, that you can talk with people, you can understand a violation, you can identify violations, and you can um, address the situation as needed.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're the only uniformed officer in the vehicle
Yep.
at that point. That's interesting. I guess I always assumed I was seeing ride-alongs, and maybe a certain percentage of those were more like FTOs. So you're actually evaluated by 3 FTOs,
Yep.
and then come back to the original, which is your fourth essentially evaluation period,
Yep.
where you're in the field, you're the only uniformed officer, you're being observed by a civilian clothed FTO,
Yep.
and this wraps up your probation
Ye-
or
So nope. So you'll still be on probation. So
year probation probably. Okay.
yep.
But now you're going to go out on your own. You're going to wrap things up, your fourth observation period, and then go out on your own.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So basically you finish up that final phase with them, and then you go in front of what's called the board of evaluators, which you're going in front of a lot of the higher ranking officers and
Hmm.
leadership with the game and fish, and
Hmm.
you're explaining to them, hey, this was my journey from start to finish. They'll talk with each one of your FTOs and your primary phase, the person you had for your first phase, and then that final phase, that little fourth period that you had, they're going to be there as well. And basically, they will decide whether you are ready or not to go out in the field alone. And
Wow. Very cool.
Yep.
So you got to sit in front of a board after all of that,
Oh yeah. Oh
after
yeah.
getting hired and going through those oral boards and the psych eval and all that back and forth.
Yep.
And then they run you through the ringer for 6 months in the academy.
Oh yeah.
And then you come out and you're under the pressure of 3 different FTOs evaluating you, sizing you up, every aspect of your personal and professional life. And then you come out of that and you got to go through another board with the brass of the organization.
Oh yeah.
That's a lot, man. That's a lot. It's a lot, but it's all good. It helps to ensure that quality people are
Yep.
the ones that make it through the gauntlet, right? Only quality officers are gonna survive that whole process and wind up in the field one day. So that's if anything else, the public can be assured that you've all been vetted, right? So
I
anybody in
would
the
say so.
field, yeah, anybody in the field has been through the ringer,
Yep.
run the gauntlet and survived it. So it's really a testament to all that you go through. And man, it sounds intense. And I might even suggest it sounds a little more intense than some of the municipal officers. But I could very well be mistaken and probably am. But that is quite the process.
Yeah, I will say, it's pretty cool. I've talked with a lot of people about the difference between city police departments and being a game warden, and I will say about probably 90 to 95% of the people that I see on a daily basis being a game warden, they're genuinely happy to see me. They're like, it's really cool being able to talk with a game warden, see a game warden. This is awesome. Of course, you run across that 5% that are having a
Yeah.
bad day or did something
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Versus a city cop.
yeah,
Nobody wants to see you coming.
yeah, they're probably on the inverse of it, where they're done with the 95% of the people they see
Yeah.
is because they had a bad day or something
Yeah.
something did not go well.
Yeah.
Um, but that's one thing I think that's pretty cool
Yeah.
about being a game warden, and not only that, but I mean you look at the areas we get to patrol in. I mean, I started out my career as soon as I got through the FTO period. I started out in 18B. For those that don't know, that's basically based out of Baghdad, Arizona. It's in
Hmm.
between Wickenburg on the way up to Kingman.
Hmm.
So like halfway between Phoenix, halfway between Kingman area.
Yeah.
And
There's no big bucks over there either, by the way, anybody. There's
yeah,
no big
yeah,
bucks over
yeah,
there.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's where I met your boy at one of
Yeah.
the youth camps out there. He was helping out on a youth javelina camp and
Hmm.
showing off some of the rifles that you guys have, and some of the kids were dropping their first game animal or first big game animal utilizing those rifles. So it was pretty cool. Um,
Yeah,
but
we'll get to that later because, like I said, you're not just a friend, but you're a customer, and
absolutely,
definitely want to talk about some of the success you and others have had with your system you got from us. But so you're going to the post, you're getting post certified, you're going through the academy, you're learning law enforcement. None of that is really specific to being a wildlife manager. In other
correct.
words, you're not learning to collar sheep and jump out of helicopters in the police academy. That's all specialized stuff that you're doing after the fact. So at what point were you trained on all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So basically, during the police academy, the way I viewed it is that they're training you how to be a cop and how to survive being a cop. After you graduate the police academy, then you go through the Arizona Ranger Training School, and that's what trains you how to become a game warden. And so that's that 2 to 3 month period that
Why
you
is it
have.
called Ranger Training School? That's not referring to DPS Ranger, is it?
No, no, it's
Okay.
not. Yep. So
Okay.
it's referring to game ranger. That's one of
Okay.
our titles. So we have a bunch of different things that were called or that other states recognize their wildlife
Yeah.
officers
Yeah.
as. Um,
Okay.
game wardens in Arizona, they're called wildlife managers. That's
Right. Your
that's their
title is officially wildlife manager, even
Yep.
though I might refer to you as a warden or an officer. Your title technically is wildlife manager.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
And so we're called wildlife managers. Other states call us game wardens, wildlife officers, conservation officers. I can promise you this: if you call us one of those things, we're going to look at you. We're going to acknowledge you. I promise we're not going to give you the
Right.
cold shoulder or anything.
and,
But yeah, so you have
and virtually all of you really started with biology, right? Or
yep,
or chose the biology degree to fit this career, or in many cases you started down the biology path thinking you might be, you know,
yep,
looking at old trees someday, and then you wind up working for game and fish, right? So
absolutely.
some people start down this path and realize, oh no, there's an occupation to be had here, and turn a corner.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
it's really cool. I've talked with a lot of people that did exactly what you said. They originally wanted to become a fish biologist, or they wanted to work with like big game animals, and then they're like, you know what, being a game warden's pretty darn cool. And so they're 3 years in on their college degree, and they're able just to pop on over since they have the same degree anyways. They could become a game warden. They just have to go through the police officer training school basically, and as soon as they become peace officer certified, they're they're ready to rock and roll. And I think it's one of the most unique jobs out there too. Um, a lot of people in a lot of different states, they think a game wardens is only doing law enforcement, and that may be the case. It may be geared towards law enforcement in other states, but Arizona is one of the really cool states that actually allows the game wardens to also be biologists, because not only are you a peace officer, you're a law enforcement officer that's professional within your own unit, you're also going to be a biologist, a professional biologist within your unit. And I mean, all the hunt tags, all the hunt permits that you see that are set every year and how it fluctuates up and down, that's all determined by recommendations that we put forth to go forth for approval. And so it's really a cool system that the Arizona Game and Fish has. It allows the officers on the ground that are in their unit every single day, that are seeing the ebbs and flows of the population, seeing what's going on, make recommendations for the long-term sustainability and conservation of species within their unit. So it really is a cool specialized position, I would say.
So good. So get back to where you learned to jump out of helicopters and ride on bighorn sheep and tackle them to the ground and all that stuff.
Absolutely. I don't really think there's much of a learning thing with it. It's either just you got to jump on the saddle, and it's a trial by fire. So um, there's something really cool that we get to do within the game and fish department. A lot of other states, they'll contract out work to collar sheep or for different research projects. One research project that I can think of that I got to partake in when I was a game warden in Unit 23 and also in Unit 22 South has been some of our bighorn sheep collaring efforts. And this is all occurring in between, Unit 22, 24B, up in Unit 23, and we're basically looking at survivability, where these sheep are going, where we have GPS collars on them so we can see how often they're going to the lakes or they're going towards the rivers, and then how often they're going like back across the US 60 where the crossings are at. And it's all part of really big projects, so that way we can limit the amount of human wildlife interactions that we don't want, which are vehicle versus animals. So um, we basically are looking for a bunch of different data points that we can gather from one caller, and not only showing survivability, but it also shows where they're utilizing the US 60, where they're crossing at the most common. And we have current projects that we're in the works with Arizona Department of Transportation, where we're going to put in wildlife crossings to reduce the amount of wildlife versus vehicle collisions. And all this research really does help out with it. But um, as far as collaring the animals, that's the fun part. For those that don't know, the way that we collar sheep, or one of the methods that we collar sheep, are what's called net gunning. And the way to do that is you are basically inside of a helicopter. You typically are going to have four people inside of a helicopter. You're going to have the pilot, who's going to be obviously in charge of the aircraft, going up and down, super low elevation, map of the earth style flying, chasing sheep. You're going to have someone up in the front next to the pilot, and that is going to be the primary mugger, or the number one mugger. A mugger is basically the person that, after a sheep is somewhat subdued by a net, gets to jump out of the helicopter and gets to go tackle the sheep and secure it. A net gunner is going to be in the back of the helicopter, and they're going to basically have a special gun that was made that fires a blank charge. And the blank charge is attached to four different ports, and the four ports have the compressed gas, basically from the combustion of the blank charge firing off, attached to some really heavy weights that are attached to a giant net. And so what we do is we locate the sheep, we fly around, try and find a safe area, or as safe as possible, to go ahead and net the sheep. Obviously, if anyone has ever hunted sheep or seen sheep out in the wild, you're going to see they're in some really steep habitat, and um, it might not be safe in probably 90% of the areas to go ahead and net those sheep. And I would argue to say that I would say over half the time that we see sheep, we're not able to net them because it's not safe for the animal and not safe for the employees.
Yeah,
And
they're on a cliff,
they
right?
are.
Somewhere along the Salt River corridor.
Yep.
So kind of treacherous terrain, we'll call it, right?
Very, very
Yeah,
treacherous.
very treacherous. Like so steep you can't even net them.
Yep.
You don't want to
Yep.
get out.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, so basically, I'll give you a little start to finish of what it looks like when we're actually going out to capture. So we go through big safety debrief, make sure everyone's on the same page, knows their roles. We got two muggers. We got the primary mugger up in the front, secondary muggers in the back. We got the pilot, and we got the net gunner. And so the secondary mugger in the back, they're basically ready to help reload different net guns for the net gunner. And so once the net gunner fires off his first net, we have a second gun that's ready to rock and roll. They hand that second gun over to the net gunner, and they start reloading that first net gun that they had already deployed. So we're flying around. We locate a sheep. We get it to an area that we can go ahead and collar. And I mean, we are literally flying map of the earth super low. And these pilots are absolutely amazing. We go through Papillon. They offer charters up on the Grand Canyon area. I think they're based out of Tucson area. It's just south of the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And they have some of the best pilots I've ever seen. I mean, we are flying super close to the earth. They're dodging saguaros. They're coming around. They're getting hit by crosswinds and everything, and they are extreme. And during this whole time, we have a net gunner that's attached to a harness that's basically hanging on the skids, just trying to get a good angle on the sheep to make sure that they're not going to hit any other sheep, because you should only target one at a time inside the net, and then two, they're not going to get hung up on anything if they are deploying that net gun. So they fire a net gun. Um, let's just say that net is successful and it goes over a sheep and it's somewhat hung up. Then what they do is they get to the ground as quick as they can, the helicopter pilot, or at least as close to the ground as they can get you. And then you get out of that helicopter. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times that they're like, hey, this is as low as we can get. And I literally have to climb down off that skid and hang on the bottom of the skid and drop down still 2-3 feet and go run and tackle that sheep. And more times than not, the sheep will have at least like two legs or a horn or something, and starting to get stuck on bushes, and that's when your job as a mugger really comes to effect. You got to go run up to that sheep. You got to secure them by getting them on the ground. And for those that don't know, we have two different types of bighorn sheep. We have the Rocky Mountain, which are typically bigger, and we have the desert. The desert sheep are a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to manipulate. My first ever capture, we got to do Rockies, the big boys, and I sent a couple pictures over to Paul. We could probably bring those up so you guys can see them. And my first ever capture was a ram, and I remember to this day he had one horn, just one side of his horn that was basically secured, and he's still running. And me as a young game warden, I was like, you know what? I gotta get this sheep on the ground. And so I remember I got dropped off. I'm sprinting. I'm going right after the sheep, and he keeps getting hung up briefly, but then getting out. He gets hung up. Horn gets stuck for a second. Keeps running. And I just remember I was like, okay, I need to get him on the ground. Let's do this. I grabbed a hold of one of his horns, grabbed a hold of one of his legs, and then he started taking off with me on top of his back. I promise you, I probably rode for about 20 to 30 yards plus before that sheep finally got on the ground. And I remember thinking
To
like,
throw an arm bar on him or something, some jujitsu or what?
no,
How'd you?
no. So I got lucky. I wish I could say I did something that cool. It just ended up getting hung up, and it slowed down. I was able to grab one leg and was able to flip him on his side, cover up his eyes, and then it's just
Holy smokes!
waiting for your teammates to get there.
I would have been
And
scared shitless.
oh,
That thing would have that he kicked the shit out of me.
yeah,
Literally
I
kicked me to death.
I don't think there's any moment in my head that was like, this is a good idea. I remember thinking like, this is like the one thing I'm like, this is not self-preservation at all, but this is the coolest freaking thing you ever get to do. I mean, how many people get to
No
say,
doubt.
Yeah,
Tackle a bighorn sheep,
I
right?
got to tackle a bighorn sheep. I got to jump out of a helicopter. I got to, I mean, on accident, of course, but ride a bighorn sheep. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
pretty cool stuff. Um,
You get 8 seconds to get your 8 seconds in?
oh, I think I got right around that. It probably, yeah, it probably only lasted like 2 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. It literally felt like slow motion for me riding on that sheep. So um, it's really cool. One of the guys I go with, he was actually featured on a couple different other podcasts and like social media platforms. Officer Baker, and he was dropped off to go after after some sheep that were holed up in a cave, right? And so he walks up. There's no net on these sheep. They're holed up, and they were telling him, "Hey, go scare those sheep out of the cave so we can try and get it." Well, he walks up to the cave, and right in front of him is a ewe staring at him. So what does he do? He grabs onto the horns and pulls it out of this cave, and he actually tumbles down the little mountainside, holding on to the sheep. He didn't need a net to get the sheep. He just straight up just wrestled this thing down, and I mean, he fell. He fell a decent ways. It was a pretty good fall. I'll make sure that you get the video so you can
That's
see it.
good stuff.
But
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty intense. It's
It's
probably
dangerous stuff. When I was in the fire service, I was on the technical rescue team.
yeah,
And for a short time, I was responsible for coordinating our helicopter training. So we did helicopter rescue, long lining, and whatnot.
yeah,
And that's very, very dangerous. A pilot once described a helicopter as a million different parts, all moving in opposite directions at the same time.
yep,
And so when you're flying this thing in the mountains, right, with these air currents like you're talking about,
yep,
we used to practice one skid where the pilot would ease into a mountainside, a cliff, like you're talking about, or
yep.
simulating extricating a patient off of there, and they would just touch one skid to the ground, one skid. So now they're balancing the aircraft with one skid um, on a cliff edge. But I remember you could reach out with a finger and you could push the helicopter. So it's not that stable
Nope.
of a vehicle, and we're loading patients on and off a helicopter, and the pilot is just looking forward on the controls. He's got a point picked out up there, and he's just laser focused, man. But it's dangerous shit. And then you're trying to jump these animals and
Yep.
jump out of helicopters and ride them like a bronco. It's crazy shit. I'm
Yeah.
scared just listening to
Oh, it's a blast. It's the scariest thing we do, but I
it.
tell you what, like you got to be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie to agree to do that.
For
And
sure, that's good stuff.
yeah,
So
it's
tell me,
fun
why
stuff.
are you collaring the sheep? Because as I would think that, like my experience around sheep is mostly around the Salt River Canyon,
Yep.
around these lakes, and the sheep go up and they come down to drink, and they go up and they come down to drink. So why do we need collars on sheep if they live right there all the time?
Yep. So the thing is, they don't actually live there all the time. They're pretty migratory. They will move back and forth quite a bit. We've had some sheep that we've collared on the 24B side of the Salt River, around Canyon Lake, Saguaro Lake, Apache Lake, around those areas, and they go south of the US 60 into Unit 37B. And I mean, they will move quite a bit of distance. One of the primary reasons that we've collared sheep as well as deer along that corridor is to see where they're utilizing and crossing the highways at. Um, for anyone that's lived in Arizona or has ever worked in any of the mines, they will see sheep everywhere. You'll see, elk or deer that have been hit on the sides of the roads. And one of the ways we're looking at mitigating the risk of that is by figuring out where to put in wildlife crossings. And so we get pretty big grants, or the Arizona Department of Transportation gets grants in order to help out with that. And then secondarily, it just helps with the survivability, for models, for us to determine how many tags we're going to set, in order to determine where the sheep are going during different periods of time, such as during the rut, like in December time frame, when the sheep are battling it out along the Salt River corridor. Are they sticking there only during the rut? Are the ewes going off to another location to go ahead and give birth to their lambs? Where are they at? And the callers help us determine that information and give us that info that we need.
Yeah, interesting. If I remember right, there's a new wildlife crossing going in on I-17, maybe a couple. I think that's part of the remodel expansion of
Yep.
I-17. I think I saw some signage there or something. Does that sound familiar to you?
I'm not as familiar with the I-17, but I do know that it's currently in the works to add some multiple wildlife corridors and crossings throughout the
What
state.
what options do you have other than a tunnel underneath the roadway that funnels animals, right, with fencing or whatnot?
Yep.
Otherwise, I'm familiar with the one between Payson and the rim up
Yep.
at 260 where the lights flash. So if it
Yep.
detects an animal is within range, you get these warning lights, but those animals are still coming across the highway.
They are.
So
Yep.
what sort of options are we looking at these days to help improve the overall safety of those animals crossing?
Yep, absolutely. So we do have a couple wildlife crossings in that specific area that you referred to. So we'll have animals utilize an underpass basically. So along the 260, we have basically exactly what you described, a little funneling of like fences that lead to an underpass going underneath the 260, so they can go from the north side of the 260 to the south side and not have to cross the road. But other than that, we have overpasses throughout other areas. So, for instance, along the US 93 up around Kingman area, we have an overpass that bighorn sheep use, and they go from one side of the 93 to the other, and they utilize it quite regularly. I mean, in the area, ever since we had that, the wildlife versus vehicle collisions went down significantly. So they do work, and if they're available, the animals are going to try and use them.
I don't know if I've seen that. Is the overpass constructed? How's it constructed? Is it constructed with natural
So it looks
elements or is it asphalt?
Yep.
What's it look
So
like?
so the bottom side, it's like a little asphalt sort of like cement setup, and then on top it has like a little dirt, like more natural looking, basically. So that way the animals feel a little bit safer
It
crossing over.
encourages them. Yeah.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
yep.
Okay. So you were in 23 when you came out of the academy. I think we've been
I was
talking. So
I was an 18B
you
first,
were an
and then
18B. Right.
moved
Right.
to 23 within about a year. Yep.
Yeah. So how many years total you been on now?
So just under 7.
So you're in your seventh year.
Yep.
And you were in 23, recently moved to 22 South.
Yep.
Um, Tell me about 23.
Yep. Oh
What
man.
a cool unit.
Yeah.
It's my favorite unit in the state.
Yep.
Has a little bit of everything, extremely diverse, a lot of animals, extremely extremely remote areas of that unit. Tell us a little bit about it. I'm always been fascinated by that unit from the first time I hunted there.
Absolutely. So Unit 23, and I would argue to say that's probably my favorite unit as well. It's basically starts from up on top of part of the rim above like Tunnel Creek, Christopher Creek area, and it goes across the 260 in some of the areas, and goes on south. If you're familiar with like the Salt River corridor area, and then halfway in between Roosevelt Lake to the west side of Roosevelt Lake. So it's a pretty large area. Um, it's very well known for having very mature age class elk. I mean, some of the biggest. I mean, I don't even want to say some. A lot of the elk that have been harvested out of 23 have made record bucks. Um, it's not uncommon for me to have been going out there glassing in the morning and to see multiple 350 plus inch bulls just running around close to a road, going and chasing cows, getting in their harems. I mean, it really is a magical unit. I think the coolest thing about Unit 23 is not only are you in some beautiful country with elk, deer, all different types of big game animals, but the community and the people that hunt it are so passionate about Unit 23 because it really is something special. Um, I made a lot of lifelong friends there professionally. I've made a lot of good projects. One of the projects, and I worked with you on, and you helped fund. We had the National Wild Turkey Federation, we had the Arizona Mule Deer Organization, and we had Precision come out and help out. And you guys funded, I think, about $6,500 in materials to be put out on the field, to go ahead and increase the wildlife waters, and or to basically fix wildlife waters to increase the water available for the wildlife waters for the animals to use. And I mean, we got probably what 40 people, I think it was, that weekend.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing about it was, it came up as an idea. I was like, hey, I'd really like to do this. I think it'd be really cool. Talked with you, talked with Terry from AMDO, talked with a couple other people from NWTF, and ended up getting everyone on board. And they're like, hey, we could fund this, and we could do a couple more potentially. And my idea was just to fix the two that were in the worst shape. And they're like, hey, if we could get more people, why don't we try and do this? I'm like, let's do it. Let's try for it. So we advertised for it. We got 40 people to come out there and sweat for a full weekend, and we fixed 13 or 14 different wildlife waters out there. And I mean, these were in different states of needed of repair, from just fences being down to the water being inaccessible because the ramps were broken, or trees falling on top of the water. And we went out there, busted our butts, and got it all done. But it just goes to show you how passionate the public is about those areas, and being able to hunt in those areas, being able to fish in those areas, that they want to make sure that it's going to be able to be uh, basically in good shape for their kids and their children to go ahead and enjoy for future generations to come. And that's really what it's all about, is sportsmen banding together, working, with the Game and Fish, working with the non-governmental organizations such as the NWTF, the AMDO, to come together and to make sure that something that we have that's so beautiful is going to be able to be accessed for multiple years to come by future generations. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that when we went ahead and fixed all of those waters, that within probably about, I would say, a day or two, we were getting people saying, "Hey, I got to see, elk drinking out of that water that we fixed," or "Hey, I got to see bears going and drinking out of that drinker." Like, that was awesome. And without your guys' help, without the volunteers that came out, that would not have been possible. But it's so cool because not only is it such a cool unit being in Unit 23, but it's also, in my opinion, probably the most involved, that a lot of people want to try and get involved in the unit. So, I've seen other units where people are like, "Hey, it's cool. Like, we could fix a water or something like that." People are coming out for every single project that we have out there. They're coming out for every single youth camp. They're coming out for everything that we had in 23. And I mean, it's not uncommon for us to have 40 people coming out for water projects. It's not uncommon for us to have 40, 50 people come out for the youth camps out there. So it's been pretty darn cool, to be able to have that many interested people come out and help. And I think that's what really made 23 so magical for me, is being able to be a part of that.
We had a lot of volunteers show up, and a little testament to the value of volunteering. That's an area that I know really well. I would almost consider it my backyard, but I found a couple tanks, thanks to you, that I didn't know were there before.
Yeah.
That was, one of those benefits that I didn't expect, was learning a little bit more about the area and some really kind of secret spots. So but then, we did really good work. So big shout out to Terry Herndon from the Arizona Mule Deer organization for making that happen, putting all those volunteers together,
Yeah.
running the camp to feed and take care of those volunteers for the couple of days. And also my buddy Dan Zellner from Lucky Canyon Outfitters, because I remember that one tank we had a unique issue,
Yeah.
and we needed something welded up. And Dan Zellner, from Lucky Canyon Outfitters, I took a picture, I gave him some dimensions, and he fabricated that thing up and came up and we replaced it. And I'm pretty sure it's been functioning fine ever since. So big shout out to those studs for stepping up and helping where they could as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, those guys, you guys made it super easy, and it was the coolest thing ever, being able to go out there and be like, "Hey, this is what we're gonna need." I gave a list out to Terry. He worked with you. He worked with the NWTF, and they're like, "Hey, this is what we need to get." And I think you even fabricated one of the ramps that we utilized on there with a little like spin sort of thing, like basically, in order to
Yeah.
keep the animals from going into the
Yeah.
water, slipping.
Right.
And so, I mean, that obviously, was a couple $100s of material and lots of time, and we got to lug that thing probably about a half mile down a
Hmm.
mountainside to go to that water. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, it made a huge difference, and those
Yeah,
wildlife animals are using that water every day. So
that's
it's
great.
pretty cool.
So, take us through like a typical day. It's not hunting season. You maybe you've got some camping going on, but what's a typical day look like? And maybe fill us in on what are some of the more common violations that you're seeing when you're patrolling non-hunting seasons.
Absolutely. So one of the cool things, I just want to preface this too, being a game warden, you get to make your own schedule for the most part. The only times you don't get to make your own schedule are if you have a holiday weekend that you have to go out and patrol, such as like July 4th weekend, you'll have major operations like Operation Dry Water, just the holiday periods where we're going to see a lot of people committing violations, right? But during a non-hunting season, right now, for me at least, so I'm currently the game warden in 22 South, and I'm the primary watercraft operator for Canyon Lake. So I have my own boat out there, and typically I'll go out and patrol during the summer months, which range from the end of April all the way through the middle to end of August timeframe. And sometimes a little bit longer depending on our Arizona summers, which, as you guys all know, go quite deep into the fall sometimes. But it's awesome because I'll just be like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna go patrol Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week," and then I'll leave some additional time for some admin stuff to do at home. Because with any type of law enforcement job, you have certifications you have to upkeep, you have to write reports from the weekend, you have to stay up to date on current issues. But on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when I'm out there patrolling Canyon Lake, the primary things I'm looking for are just people being unsafe or doing things that could potentially end up killing them or someone else. So the number one things I'm looking for when I'm out there are safe operation. Upon seeing someone not being a safe operator or doing something illegal, such as having kids without life jackets. So if you're 12 or under, your kid has to have a life jacket at all times when you're underway. If you see someone holding an infant or someone holding or a little 4-year-old, sitting in the boat without a life jacket on, that's an issue and that needs to be addressed. So we will conduct a stop on that person. The other things I'll see are people bow riding, which is sitting on the front of the boat in a non-seated area meant for seating. The biggest things are like pontoon boats. You'll see people sitting in front of the gated area instead of a pontoon. They're just hanging their legs down in between the pontoon, and God forbid they hit a wave or something. And what's going to happen is they're going to fall right underneath in between the pontoons. And usually you have the lower unit and the propellers right there, and it's not pretty getting hit by that. So
Not going to be pretty.
no,
Not going to be a good outcome.
no, so our biggest thing is safety. We'll stop for safety related violations. Then,
Yeah.
of course, what ended up coming to the safety violations, we'll check to make sure, that the operator's sober. So when you're on a boat, you still have to be sober. You still have to make sure that you're able to operate safely.
Oh.
So yeah, I know. But
We need to tell people that.
yeah, exactly.
We need to get that out.
So we'll run across people, and sometimes they just generally don't know. They could be new operators or something.
Sure.
And generally, what I do, as officers, we have a lot of discretion, and I like to lean more so on the education side of things. As long as it's not a glaring, huge safety violation, I'm generally going to give people warnings. Where I don't give people warnings if they have multiple violations, they do multiple safety violations. So,
Yeah. I've
like
already told you twice. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I can't tell you how many times I told people like, "Hey, you have to have everyone seated on the inside," or "Hey, you can't be seated right there when you're above a wake speed. You could fall down." And then 10, 15 minutes later, I see them doing it again, and then it's like, okay, now you're getting a ticket. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, the other things would be, generally, if I pull someone over, I give them warnings, attach it in our system, so that way, if someone else pulls them over for the same thing a week or two down the road, they can see, hey, this person was already warned about this thing. The other thing is if I have multiple violations. So, like for instance, if someone has like a bow rider or someone's transom riding on the back of the boat, and I pull them over, and then I do a safety inspection. They don't have enough life jackets for everyone on board, or they're missing a fire extinguisher, or something that is required. I'm generally going to give them a ticket for one thing and warn them on the other things, as long as it seems like they're going to understand it and they're not knowingly committing those violations. Other than that too, so that's just one facet of me being able to do watercraft patrol. There's also the ability to do what's called off-highway vehicle patrol during the non-hunting seasons. And we'll be in side by sides, we'll be in full size vehicles, and we're just making sure that people are safely operating the side by sides. And the most common violations I see for that are kids underneath the age of 18, so 7 and under. They have to have a helmet on at all times while they're on an ATV or they're inside of a UTV. There's no real excuse for not having your kid having a helmet on. The other things are like reckless driving. You'll see people uh, taking curves really fast, almost running into other people, passing people when it's not safe, and causing people to swerve out of the way. You'll run across people riding and exceeding the occupancy limit on the side by sides. Like I really can't tell you. I've probably seen just this year alone, probably a good dozen to 2 dozen operators that are like 3 to 4 people too many on ATVs, or most of the ATVs or quads, how most people know them. They're typically meant for one person, and that's the operator. They're not allowed to have a second person or a third person or
Right.
a fourth person, and you'll see
Right.
people piled up on there a lot.
Yeah. So I spent, my wife and I spent 20 plus years, part-timers in Forest Lakes, which is a big, big, beautiful community, but a lot of side by sides.
Yep.
And every year, people severely injured, if not killed, a
Yep.
lot of young people. And I would say, I'm not an officer, but I would say the most common violation in our neck of the woods there was kids,
Yep.
young operators, and just doing crazy shit, doing stupid stuff, too fast. Um, but underage for the most part for
Mhm.
operating these kind of vehicles and without any adult supervision and just behaving crazy.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of people tore up. I've come across them on horseback or when we're out side by siding. And there's a lot of trauma that goes on in that little tiny community
Yep.
every year. So yeah, that's a real problem.
It really is, and I think I talked with you. I think literally the last day that I was the game warden, Unit 23, I had that 7 or 8 year old little girl
That's
that
right.
was fatally killed in an
I
accident,
remember that.
and
Hmm.
that was a tough call. I mean,
Yep.
a lot
Yep.
of times being a game warden during the non-hunting months, you'll be out there doing OHV patrol and doing watercraft patrol, but um, you're also a first responder. You are still a law enforcement officer,
Yeah.
and you're expected to um, go to those calls once they come out. I was below the rim. I was around like the Colcord Road area when that call kicked out, and unfortunately, we had two 14-year-olds and one 7-year-old severely injured, and then that one 7 or 8 year old female ended up passing away on scene. So you'll have to go to bad calls. You'll have to be the officer on
Yeah.
scene for that.
Wasn't that somebody else's kid too? Wasn't somebody driving someone else's kid? It
So
was it was really tragic circumstances, but I think it's important to talk about
yeah,
because I think people need to hear the tragic details sometimes for it to
absolutely.
sink in. But does that sound right in that case? I want to say there was something like that.
So it was the cousin of the female. It was a 14-year-old that was driving the vehicle when she lost control, and
Right.
basically what happened was they ended up flipping along the forest road, and all or three of the occupants were ejected. The only person that was not ejected was the 14-year-old driver.
Right.
And the girl that had died, she actually flipped over in front of the vehicle, and the vehicle rolled over on top of her. I remember
Yeah.
there was a doctor that was on scene, and even the doctor was like, "If I had this girl on the surgery table, she would not have survived."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's tragic, you know.
Yeah.
So,
So let's talk about that for a second. Now
yep,
now we're doing some safety awareness and whatnot, but
yep,
even if it helps one person, that
yep,
14-year-old doesn't even know how to drive a car.
yep,
They're probably a weekender,
yep,
so they live in the valley, right? They're a flatlander. No disrespect, but they don't spend a lot of time around these machines, and then they come up north with their cousins, their relatives, one weekend, maybe a few weekends a year,
yep,
jump into this machine they know nothing about. They don't know how to drive to begin with,
mm,
but they don't know its handling characteristics. They don't know its power. They don't know what it's capable of. And this is what we see around, my old community, Forest Lakes, for decades,
yep,
is this exact same scenario. Kids getting into these vehicles and doing stupid shit and getting people hurt really bad.
yep.
Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking, and it's 100% preventable. These kids that shouldn't be operating or even driving a vehicle because A, they don't have their license yet. B, they probably don't have the understanding that, hey, this is 1,000 cc vehicle. It has a lot of power behind it, and
Yeah.
you
Even
know,
says turbo on the side of it. And,
yeah,
when you turn it over to a 14-year-old girl who
yeah,
doesn't know how to drive anything
yep,
and put them behind these very, very powerful machines that handle much different than
yep,
even a street vehicle. So yeah. Yeah, but it seems like such a safe environment. Like what could really happen, right? There's nobody up here. We're in the forest.
mhm,
There's nobody else on these forest roads, but there is.
yep,
There's actually a lot of people on weekends on the forest roads. So head-on collisions are not uncommon.
yep,
Going off the road and hitting a tree. Trees don't budge. Have you ever seen a tree budge? I've never seen a tree budge to a vehicle, a truck, a car, doesn't matter. 40 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, trees don't budge.
yep.
It's a very, very um, terminal object
It
to
is, and
run into.
that's probably the number one excuse I hear from people is, "No, I'm a safe driver." And it's like, well, you may be, but do you trust every person out here that has 1,000 cc or the one that has a 14-year-old that's driving that doesn't know how to drive to not hit your vehicle?
Yeah,
And me personally, I don't. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that
yeah,
a my children are as safe as possible, anyone that is in my vehicle is as safe as possible, and then B, that I'm as safe as possible and trying to do whatever I can. And that's just the big thing that people don't realize is although they may be safe or they feel that they are safe, there's other people that are out there too, and they might
Yeah,
not be as safe as you. And all it
yeah.
takes is one
No,
one
no doubt.
person to make a bad mistake.
And I'm one of those people. Well, I live in the forest. I live in Overguard full time, and we don't go out on weekends.
Yep.
We don't go jump in our side by side and recreate in the forest on weekends because it's just it can be a madhouse in the summertime. Let
Absolutely.
me go back to that 7-year-old. I don't want to keep bringing it up, but I
Yep.
but I do want to emphasize any learning points. She was ejected. So was she belted?
No, she wasn't. So
No belt, no helmet.
yeah, this
So
specific
the
one.
addition of those 2 things, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yep.
If she had simply been belted and
Yep.
simply had a helmet on, we wouldn't even be talking about it, right? It might
Most
just be in the
most
past.
likely. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, very tragic, very, very sad. And people just need to think and and recognize that these are dangerous things.
Yep.
And your kid's not a good driver.
Yep.
None of them are.
Yep.
None of these little shits they put in these side by sides and quads in the forest. None of them are good drivers. They're all little maniacs, just like the rest of us were when we were 13, 14, 15, and 16. Very, very dangerous circumstances created and endorsed by parents, responsible adults more often than not.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
So you brought up the fact that you're alone, which is horrible, which
Yep.
is horrible. I was a city firefighter, so right away I'm responding with 3 other guys.
Yep.
We get on a big scene. There's another truck coming. There's 4 more guys, and then 4 more guys, and 4 more guys.
Yep.
When I um, when I moved up north, and I took on a whole new respect for rural EMS, where 2 guys might go out in a rig, and it's just them.
Yep.
You can go on an accident with 3 or 4 people, and you're outnumbered. I never experienced, not much of my career at all, being outnumbered. So back to you as a singular officer. No one's coming. You don't have backup. It's
Right.
not like a city cop. City cop calls for backup, man, surrounded in a moment's notice. DPS, maybe 15, 20, 45 minutes.
Yep.
You could be
Takes longer.
hours, could
Yep.
be hours before you have backup. So that's a lot to consider too. What's that like? You got to be very mindful, right? When you're out there, like,
Absolutely.
take me through your thought process I know that's got to weigh on you and that's got to be on the forefront of your mind all the time. Like, I'm all alone.
Yep.
I'm down here in the middle of nowhere in 23. Nobody's coming. So how do you approach situations like that?
Yeah. I think this comes back to a really good mentor that I had. And he said, you could be very well trained for a hand to hand combat. You could be trained for whatever. But the number one thing you should be trained in when you're working as a remote law enforcement officer is verbal judo. And you got to be good to go ahead and talk with someone and diffuse situations, good with the mind, be able to talk people out of a situation that could be
De-escalate.
dangerous. Yep, exactly. So,
Which city cops don't often think about, right? It's like they don't need to de-escalate it. I'm here to arrest you. We're taking you down, me and all my buddies. But you're right. You got to de-escalate this because you do not want this to get worse. You do not want to draw your weapon. You do not want to have a situation get out of control.
yeah, and I mean one that comes to mind. I remember I had to arrest this guy that came back with a felony warrant, and his felony warrant included assault on a peace officer, a DV charge, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is a bad guy. And at first he's all upset, super angry about everything, and just being able to talk with him a little bit beforehand, and as soon as I found out he had the warrant, I was like, hey, do I have an additional unit that might be able to come? And I was just north of Young. There was no one there. And so it's like it's going to
And
be an
no one's
extended.
getting there anytime soon.
Yeah, and so they said extended ETA about 45 minutes probably. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, so by myself for 45 minutes with this guy, I have to arrest this guy, and he knows he has a warrant. So talking with him, explaining to him the whole thing, he gets a little bit heightened, a little bit upset, and just being able to calm him down a little bit and be a human with someone is probably
Yeah.
one of the most
I
important things.
imagine you got to befriend them a little bit, right? You
Oh
got to
yeah,
kind of talk to them about their personal life and get them talking, keep them talking, right? And kind of befriend them a little bit, make them feel like they're
absolutely,
being heard.
absolutely.
Yeah, keep the conversation going. And
Yep.
yeah,
Every
that's got to be tough.
every person I talk to, I give respect unless someone gives me a reason not to. And especially being a remote game warden, you have to be a little bit more mindful of being able to de-escalate and use your verbal judo a little bit more successfully. And I just remember being nice to this guy, seeing how his day was going, blah 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 blah. He committed a violation. I can't remember what the violation is off the top of my head, but remember I got his ID and he gave me his real name and everything. He came back with that warrant. And me talking with him, explaining to him, waiting for it to get confirmed and everything. I explained to him, hey, dude, you got this warrant. We're gonna go ahead and get this all figured out. And he was like, man, are you kidding? Super upset. He's getting a little bit, you can tell, antsy, and his sense we're getting heightened a little bit. And I'm like, hey, look, dude, like you've been really cool with me. You've been talking with me pretty cool, man. I think like I'm gonna take you. I'm gonna drop you off to this guy. I'm gonna write a supplemental report for this thing. You've been really cool with me. I'm gonna have a report so that way they can at least see that, hey, you weren't giving me any trouble. You weren't doing this kind of stuff, and that you were pretty calm and
Yeah, they
reserved. And he's
wouldn't escalate their situation in
yeah,
court.
and he seemed pretty chill. After I sort of mentioned that, he was like, "All right." He's like, "Well, what do I got to do then, man? Are you going to put me in the back of your vehicle and go?" And I don't know if you're familiar with the game worn vehicles, but we don't have any cages or anything. We just literally have a
Yeah,
truck with an extended cab, and
yeah,
most of the time that person's sitting
yeah,
right
I've
next
been
to
in it.
you.
I've been in it with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's not secure. If you're an officer with a dangerous person, it's not secure.
No, it's not. So I mean, of course, you got like the handcuff belts and everything you can put on people that will secure their
Yeah,
hands,
yeah,
to
yeah,
their
yeah,
waist. But
yeah,
yeah, it's just verbal judo is the number one thing I think, and that was during the off season. Not even during a hunting season. So
yeah.
I mean, you're still responsible for patrolling your unit, making sure during the off season that there aren't people out there poaching that are killing animals illegally.
Right,
And
right,
I
right.
mean,
Yeah, good point. Poaching doesn't always occur during hunting season.
it,
That's a great point. Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And one that I think of, and it was a crazy thing. I had just gotten to my new district and Unit 22, and I was patrolling with the Unit 24B game warden at the time, Officer Hull. We were called out for an OGT. An OGT is an Operation Game Thief call, where basically someone can call the Game and Fish Hotline, report a wildlife violation, and then the nearest officer, if it's deemed a wildlife violation, will go out there and check it out. Well, it came in as someone taking deer from the back of their truck during an archery season, but they had a bunch of rifles and they took multiple deer from the back of their vehicle, went down to a wash, and only came back up with meat. And they're like, I found this sort of weird. I didn't see any bows. It's in an area that was open for archery, but the people only had guns. They went and processed like 3 or 4 different animals and they came back up. And so Officer Hull and I were like, well, let's go check it out. And so they gave a description of the vehicle and everything. As we're pulling into this area, the vehicle is actually coming out of the trail about to leave. And so we stopped them, pull them over, talk with them, tell them the reason for the stop. And it was all Spanish speakers. No one spoke English besides one person. And we had that one person translate for us. We were out of service in the middle of nowhere. We don't have any cell phone service where we could use our translation line or anything, but we had the one guy communicating for us. We're like, hey, we heard this vehicle shot a deer. Who shot a deer from here? And the guy like talked back and forth for a second, and he said, these 3 people shot a deer. And we're like, oh, okay, like they shot one or what happened? He's like, each one of these people each shot a deer. And so we're like, oh, okay, what's going on? And so by the end of the investigation, we had like 13 or 14 different firearms that we had seized. We had 3 animals that they had shot in the middle of the night, going out hiking at nighttime with, AK-47, AK-74 style rifles, AR style rifles. And they killed it at dark time and came back first thing in the morning to that truck, put it in the truck, waited till morning so they could see, so they could cut up the animal, and that's what they did. And so it was just me and one other officer. We had about a dozen or so people that we had to account for. We're trying to be as safe as possible. People don't know what we're saying. We can't understand them. And so, we search each of the people, sit them down. No one's free to go. Everyone was inside of that vehicle. So they were technically helping transport the animal. They were in with an illegally and unlawfully taken animal. So by the end of it, we had, I think, like something like 17 or 18 different violations just from those 3 deer getting taken out, and a lot of people got into some serious trouble, and we had multiple revocations out of that. So it just goes to show you that, I mean, not every day is the same. Like, you could be going out there and expecting for it just to be a off-highway vehicle patrol, and then you could be the first on scene for an accident, or you could be going out for a boat patrol, and then you're working, a car accident when you're coming back home. I mean, there's never a same day as a game warden, which there's good things and bad things about that. The good things are there's never a dull moment. The bad things are you could be that first responder for someone's worst day of their life where they lost a family member. And that's just something that you have to come to terms with and be
Sure.
mentally prepared and ready for.
Those guys who were poaching, they were poaching for meat
They
rather
were.
rather than trophy.
They were. Yep. They even left the racks out there. So all the animals that they killed were all buck, and they ended up leaving the heads out there. They only
Wow,
took the quarters and back
just
straps
there
out.
for the meat.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
So you have a lot of back to 23 and it
Yep.
kind of kind of goes with most units, but you have a lot of outfitters
Yep.
and you have a lot of ranchers.
Yep.
So what's that like interfacing with those groups? Professional outfitters, like 23 trophy unit, trophy
Yep.
bear, trophy deer, trophy elk, both species of deer, trophy everything.
Yep.
Boone and Crockett turkey. I mean, everything is in 23.
Yep.
Um, so what's it like dealing with ranchers and outfitters? What's it like interfacing with those guys?
The ranchers, they're absolutely amazing up there. I've worked multiple partnership events. Some of them that come to mind, I've worked with the 13 Ranch. I worked with the Bar X Ranch. I've worked with, all the other ranches all throughout, like Cherry Creek, all that stuff, all throughout the entire area. And those ranchers are generally very good partners, and they're really good eyes out in the field for us if they see something weird. They're really good to report, violations they see, and they're super helpful on problem mountain lions and stuff that we've had too that maybe are killing livestock they're not supposed to. So we'll give out depredation permits for those. They are absolutely amazing to work with. The outfitters, I've had a lot of really good um, relationships with outfitters, and generally I would say most of the outfitters are out there trying to create a good experience for their clients and get them an animal successfully. There are of course sometimes where you run into something that is not on the up and up, and as an outfitter you are expected to um, be held to a higher standard, such as if you see a violation you are mandated to have to report a violation if you see it when you see it, and if you don't do that you could get in trouble for it. And of course, with it being such a highly sought after unit for elk and whitetail, some other species, um, people are gonna have their tempers flare up a little bit, so I've had to go into camps before where there's an outfitter that's furious that another outfitter had just shot a really big bull that they wanted their client to kill next week, or that they were getting ready to set their client up on an animal and the client shoots it. But the thing that I explained to them is that that animal does not belong to you. It belongs to the person that harvests it and puts their tag on it. As soon as they put their tag on it, that becomes their property and their animal. It doesn't belong to one single person. It's the public is entrusting us to manage these animals and to make sure that everyone's on the up and up and doing everything right, um, which most of the people out there understand this. Um, but the tempers can, get heightened a little bit for some of the bigger animals in the area if it gets killed from underneath someone. So those were typically the most common things that I had happen, is that another outfitter got upset, another outfitter shot an animal, and there'd be some arguing back and forth, and have to go and diffuse those situations.
Yeah. So hypothetically, I shoot a bull.
Yep.
He runs 300 yards. He dies at the feet of another hunter,
Yep.
and that hunter tags him. Who goes home with the bull?
So that would be something I need to get called about, because obviously, if the other hunter had not shot that animal, um, then he has no right to it. I mean, that's essentially like if someone ends up shooting an animal and they're getting ready to go packing for whatever reason, you're able to go up to it. In my opinion, that's theft of wildlife, theft of property right there, and that's
Mm,
basically what it ends up becoming. Even though it's not technically tagged by that person yet, you still did not harvest that animal, even though you put your tag on it. That's not that's not
mm.
your animal. So
Okay, that's not the answer I expected. I thought you were going to tell me whoever tags it gets it.
that's
So
yours.
I appreciate that. So, yeah, I really do. Because I would never do that, but I know
Yep.
people have.
Yep.
There are people who don't care if they shot it, if they harvested, if they tracked this thing down, if they
Yep.
found it. They don't care about any of that. They just find it. They want to tag it, and we've heard these stories numerous times. So,
Yep.
you as an now, is this the law or is this officer discretion? Like,
So
what
it,
is
it's
the
it's going to be probably more discretionary. So it
okay?
belongs to the person that harvests it and tags it. Now, if you run across someone that tagged an animal and they're swearing up and down that they shot it, and it becomes a he said she said, as the officer, you have to try and get as much evidence as you
Sure,
can. And
right. What are you going to do there?
yeah, ultimately, it depends on the officer to be able to get the information, to gather the evidence that they can. Um, I have had multiple times where people have both shot an animal. One that comes to mind is this guy shot a deer during the over the counter season. He hit it far back, and this deer ran in front of another hunter. The next hunter shot it, hit it in through the lungs. It died another 100, 200 yards away, and both the hunters come up on it, and they were super respectful of each other. They're like, "Hey, we both shot it. We need to figure this out." They called me there, and I talk with them and I'm like, hey, here's the deal. Either you guys can try and decide between amongst yourselves who gets it, or I can decide for you guys, right? And so I was like, I'll give my 2 cents. The hind leg shot did not hit any arteries. It's not a fatal shot. Looking
That
at
was the
the
first shot.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
Looking
yeah,
at the secondary shot, which is through the
right.
lungs, that was the fatal shot. I was like, me personally, I think that should go to that, but I want you guys to try and decide. And of course, they talked and like, yeah, the lung shot guy could get it, but ultimately, if it was up to me, I have two people that are arguing over this entire thing. Sometimes you're going to be the mediator between those two, and you might have to be a decision maker. And if
Yeah,
they're not coming to a decision, then you have to make that decision for them.
yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
I haven't ever had a situation yet where someone's been like, no, I want to keep this animal. I want to keep this animal. Both parties are wanting for it. They generally come to a pretty good consensus. But
Mhm.
I think being able to look at the animal and who shot the mortal wound on the animal would be the one that would end up being able to keep
Yeah,
it in that
yeah.
situation.
What are you running into during a hunting season? So you're out there on patrol, it's hunting season, the woods are full of people.
Yep.
What are you seeing? What's a day look like there? What are some common violations? What's that like? Tell us some good stories.
So my day typically starts before sun up, probably an hour or two before sun up. I'm getting out to areas where I know there's wildlife, where I know there's a lot of hunters, maybe where I know where there's like a big mature big scoring animal somewhere. And I'm like, I know there's gonna be a lot of people on this animal, and I will sit out there in glass and just get ready for the gunshots to start. Um, During some of the seasons, I have seen people shooting before sunup, before legal shooting light, which is 30 minutes before sunup. The other thing that I've seen people do too is going and shooting, you know, um, 2, 3 animals, and they're like, oh crap, like I thought I missed this one and I shot a second one. And when I walk up, there's 2 dead deer there. And they're like, oh crap. And they'll call in sometimes, or sometimes I'll even see them shoot both the animals. And I sit there and look at the guy and see what he's going to go do. And I have literally seen a guy drag a smaller forky into bushes and then go handle the more mature buck and take that out of the field. And then so it's me, I'm the guy that's like, hey, how'd it go so far? Get them locked into a story, see what they have to say. If they're like, oh yeah, I shot this buck, and I was like, oh cool, you see any more out there? And they're like, nope, just this one. I'm like, well, that's funny. I just saw you drag this one over to there, so let's go check it out. Then of course it's like you get those people. Um, but generally, I would say most of the people have everything squared away and everyone's doing everything ethical. Um, it's been really good lately that people have been calling in when they have made mistakes out there, such as shooting the wrong species. If someone shoots a whitetail instead of a mule deer, or someone shoots a doe, or shoots the wrong animal, or someone shoots multiple, they've been really good about calling in and self-reporting. And what I like
Yeah,
to really tell people is that if you call in and you made a mistake and you're honest about it, generally we're going to give warnings for it. We're going to take the animal that you took in excess, but you're not going to get a ticket. You're going to have a warning. You still get to keep your animal, right?
mhm,
The other side of things would be you not calling in and you trying to hide it. Then not only are you losing your animal, I can seize your firearm. You're going to be potentially going in front of the commission for a revocation where you can lose your hunting and fishing rights. And we're part of a big compact where basically 49 out of 50 of the states, if you get banned or revoked in one state, you cannot hunt in the 48 other states. So you lose a lot by trying to hide something that could just be, a simple slap on the wrist or
yeah,
a talking to,
yeah,
so a figurative slap on the wrist. Obviously, I wouldn't be slapping someone on the wrist, but
yeah.
yeah.
We self-reported one time. I was out with my son. He was a young teenager at the time, maybe 13 or 14. January around the Salt River, chasing mule deer,
Yep.
and he goes in and stalks a buck. And the kid was amazing. I'm up there glassing, watching this whole thing unfold. I'm directing him in, and he makes this stalk on this buck. And doesn't he get a shot? He gets a shot at 20 or 30 yards,
Wow.
and the it went right over the buck's back. I think he ducked right over his back, and I observed the whole thing. And I'm like, oh man, God, the kid did so good. We missed. The buck ran off. A bunch of deer ran off. I'm like, oh man, the kid did such a good job getting himself in there and doing this stalk all on his own for the most part. I mean, I was directing him up on the mountain, but he had to make it all happen. He gets a shot off on this big buck. And when I come down there, I said, hey, I'm right down there, buddy. And when I come down, I find him over there and he's in tears. He's bawling. I freak out as a father. Like I thought he was hurt. I didn't know what was going on. And he shows me a doe. So my kid shot up at this buck over this hill. The arrow went over his back and hit a doe
Yep.
right in the heart on the backside, dropped her in her tracks, and he was devastated. And it was a horrible moment, as you can imagine. But I said to him, I said, "How do you want to handle it? We can call the game warden, or what do you think?" And he goes, "Well, we should call and report." So I was proud of him for that too. And we did. So we called, and officer came out. He said, "Go ahead and dress it," and so we did that. And he did the same thing. He issued us a warning, confiscated the doe. It was heartbreaking, gut wrenching for my kid, who's new kid learning to hunt, makes a fatal mistake like that
Yep.
on a deer. Horrible. But the officer treated us like we made a mistake,
Yep.
and so self-reporting was was a good call for
Yep.
sure. Rather than trying to hide it or cover it up or be dishonest about it, we said, "Hey, come over here. We killed the wrong animal."
Yep.
And the officer treated us with some dignity and respect and did what was fair.
And I think that's the most important thing. And that's how I would say almost every single game warden would treat every single person. I have not ran into a game warden yet that would ever treat someone bad that made an honest mistake. And like I said, if you guys had not have taken the actions you guys did and tried hiding it, and God forbid, got in trouble, it would have turned out a little bit differently, But you guys doing the ethical thing, and your son being so young and being a new hunter and realizing that is huge.
Yeah,
And I know that probably made you as proud as
it
can
did.
be, you know.
It did.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think that's important for people to hear that self-reporting with honest mistakes isn't not necessarily a bad deal. So
yep, absolutely.
I think it's important for people to hear you say that.
Yep,
I was listening to a podcast. What the hell's his name? Steve Rinella.
yep,
Podcast a while back. I think he's got a segment called Campfire Stories or something like that, and s- it was all crazy outdoor hunting experiences. Um, many of them life-threatening, just perilous type of stories, um, told by the individual who experienced it. And one of those people was an Arizona Game and Fish officer who told this crazy story about catching an elk poacher up in the White Mountains and this investigation that went on. It might have been for years even.
yep,
And how he, on a whim one night, driving home in the middle of the night, decided to go up to where he thought this poacher was working and did some was doing some what's the word, reconnaissance or surveillance up in this area in the pitch black,
mhm,
and wound up catching the perpetrator down the road. And the perpetrator, the guilty guy, wound up telling the officer that I had you in my sights that night. He was looking for him in the dark. Just a crazy, gripping story. I know you've got some
yep.
good stories to share. That this is my segue to you to tell us some good stories about your 7-year career, and whether it's your cases or other people's cases. I know you got one you recently solved, but
Yep.
tell us a story or two.
Yeah, one of the more recent ones that I had last year, I had a trapping case, and trappers are very very good at hiding their tracks. They have to be able to hide a cage. They have to make sure that the trap looks like it's natural, so an animal will go into it. So sometimes when a poacher or someone is doing something illegal, they are able to hide their tracks very very well, and being able to try and go after trappers, it's just that much harder because they are already professionals at it. Um, so along the Salt River, last year, January 2024, I received a call in or from our OGT line, our Operation Game Thief line, and a person stated, "Hey, I was hiking along the Salt River, and as I'm hiking along, all of a sudden, a leg hold trap ended up ensnaring my boot and caught his foot." So, for those that don't know, a leg hold trap, it's basically something that has two jaws and it's open sort of like this. When someone steps on a pressure pad that's in the center, it closes up over something, usually a foot or usually like a leg or something like that, and it keeps the animal from getting away. Any type of leg hold trap that's on public land is unlawful. The reason for it being unlawful is because you'll run into people that are hiking, or you'll get non-target species that get stuck inside the cage or get stuck inside the lake hold trap, excuse me, and they could become seriously hurt or injured or left out there, right? This specific guy, he had knowledge, he was a trapper growing up, but obviously he was upset because he was just hiking along with his girlfriend and ended up getting stuck. I mean, and it hurts too. Leg hold traps, like once they close on something that's bigger than their target animal and it's not offset for a big human ankle, it's probably going to hurt. So this guy called in, gave me the information where it was at, and I went out there to try and locate it. So go out there. First thing that I see is a leg hold trap right there out in the open. I go ahead and make sure that it is sprung. It's sprung. We're all good to go. It's not activated again. And as I'm hiking back, a lot of trappers, they like to have what's called a trap set, which means they have not just one trap in an area, they have multiple traps set along an area. So that way, if an animal maybe doesn't come on that direct path, they might come on one of the other paths with one of the other trap sets that are set up. But I found two other trap locations that had the same setup, and both of those traps had not been triggered yet, and they had lure, they had bait, all that kind of stuff right above it. So first thing I do is I go out there, set off the traps to make sure that it's not going to be able to capture anyone, because a, it's unlawful. Lake hold trap is not allowed to be on public land whatsoever, so that trap should not have even been opened. So I sit out there for about 3-4 days waiting for that person to come out. They did not come out. And so, as a trapper, you have to check your trap daily. That person was not checking their trap daily. And so I'm like, well, I can't stay out here, forever for this. Obviously, I want to give it as much of an effort as I can. So I had another team of like two or three other people on different shifts trying to help out too. Eventually, it came to the point where I'm like, okay, it's 5 days after the fact. We haven't seen this guy yet. I'm going to go ahead and set up some trail cameras along there. And the trail cameras are basically set so that they can monitor the traffic coming in and out and can try and capture someone coming in and out, right? So I set this up and I had it perfectly hidden in there, had sand on top of it, grass on top of it. You could not see that this camera was there. Well, it rained like 2 days prior. And so all the sand, everything that I had on this trail camera got washed away. And so we had someone that was hiking through find it and they're like, hey, I found this trail camera, blah, 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 blah. And we were able to pick it up. And we're like, oh, okay, yeah, please leave it out there. This is, law enforcement camera, blah, 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 blah. And so we went up, set it up again. And that night that we reset the trail camera, we ended up getting someone going out there to check the traps and ended up being my person. The person,
In the dark?
no, it was actually right before dark time, so about
Okay.
30 minutes before dark.
Mhm.
So that person came out 30 minutes before dark. You see him come up with a catch pole. It's basically going to be a long, sort of like noose-like thing that people can use to secure animals around their neck in order to make sure they don't go or to release non-target animals. He comes out with a hammer, a bunch of other stuff that only a trapper would be utilizing. So he goes out there and he's resetting the trap and everything. And he finishes setting that trap up. He looks right into the camera and then he walks away. So I go out there 2 days after the fact. This trail camera that I had out there, because it was poor service in the area, did not have any cell capabilities, couldn't text me the pictures or whatever. So I had to manually go out and check every couple of days to make sure that the camera was still there, and B, if the person had gone there. But when I went back out there, the trap had been removed, and so I'm like, oh, okay, that means someone probably came out here and picked up the trap. I wonder if my other traps or other cameras were checked out. And one of the other cameras that I had actually had been manipulated in a way, which I found out the person that I was trying to target actually saw the camera and just turned it off. They didn't take the camera with them, but they left it. But as soon as they saw that, they got scared and they went and collected all their traps. Now, over the next week, I got a list of every single person that completed trapper's education that would match this person's demographics. So this person, I estimated between the ages of 18 to
Mm.
25-ish or so.
Age, height, weight, you were
It,
trying to narrow it down.
exactly. And so I got a list of everyone, went through to check who had active licenses, all this stuff, and got some returns of the driver's license photos. Was never able to match someone 100%, but I had some people that it could potentially be. um, Sent that picture into a organization known as the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, or ACTIC for short. I'll say ACTIC so that way I don't have to say that big old jibber jabber. So I sent this picture in to them, and they were amazing partners. They ran the photograph against all the photographs on different platforms with driver's licenses, anything that they had that's available to the governments was available to them. So they ran it through and they had one hit. They returned that hit to me. They sent it to me, and it was like a 99.999% match or something like that. I looked at the guy and I'm like, yeah, this is my guy. Found the guy's social media, looked it up, 100% my guy, was good to go. And it was cool as heck because you think of like all these different technologies that are available to us that used to not be available, just even back 10, 15 years ago. And it's cool because it combined some old fashioned game warden work with setting up cameras, having a team of game wardens that help set up these cameras that manned around the clock to try and find this guy coming in, with some newer age technology, getting a face match through this application. And we were able to get an admission from the guy that, yeah, that's my trap. And I mean, the guy was younger. He made a bad lapse of judgment, basically, and he decided to set out lake hold traps even though he knew they were illegal. And long story short, that guy got revoked for 5 years. He can't hunt or fish and anywhere basically besides one state, for the next 5 years. So
Yeah.
that was
So
pretty
without
cool.
that technology, you would have been posting wanted signs,
Y-
wanted
y-
posters around town,
You
right?
know, yeah, I
Yeah.
had like a half dozen people that it sort of looked like from that list, and one of the guys actually ended up being the guy. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is him, not 100%. But then once we got the 100% return and got the social media returns on
Yeah.
that guy, I'm like, this is my guy, 100%. So yeah, I was thinking of going like Old West, put up, wanted,
Yeah.
dead or alive, not
Yeah.
dead or alive, just kidding. But no, wanted alive, and see if we could find out who the guy
Case
was. But
closed. Case closed. Good job, Officer Shear.
yeah,
So curious with that, with the traps, aren't the traps supposed to be labeled? If
yep.
I'm a trap, you're supposed to have my identification on it, right?
Exactly. So you're supposed to have some type of identifying thing on
Yeah.
there. So that's one of the things that the individual was cited for.
Hmm.
You're supposed to have your trapper license number, your first name, last name,
Yeah.
something that can identify that, hey, this trap belongs to this person. So
Yeah.
they were unmarked. They were on public land. He had real live like bait. He had like feathers, like real feathers of animals that were there. You're supposed to have certain distances away. You're supposed to have lures set up a certain distance away, and all this stuff. I mean, there was a lot of different violations. So, of course,
Mm.
for the people that are knowingly committing violations, I like to go by the old adage that you will try and use your discretion as much as possible, and to the people that make honest mistakes, be nicer, be easier on those people. But the people that are absolutely poaching, they're doing something wrong, drop the hammer on them. And this guy knew that he was doing something illegal that ended up resulting in someone being hurt because of them setting a lake hold on public land. And yeah, so I decided for everything I could, and that was that.
Yeah.
So
Right on. Well, Seth, we covered a lot of stuff today, man. So I want to wrap up with this, though. Like I said, you're a customer of ours also.
yep.
A couple of years ago, you bought a 300 PRC from us. Tell us about that whole experience. Tell us what that's been like.
Absolutely. So I want to say too that rifle has been amazing. I not only am I using it personally, it's a 300 PRC. It's your Altapo platform, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I've ended up bringing that to multiple youth camps. These kids that are coming out on their first hunts, and a lot of times parents that maybe did not grow up hunting, have a really old rifle that is sighted for 100 yards and they've never shot beyond that. And so it can become sort of tough. What I always like to tell people is, hey, I want to try and use your rifle. I want to try and use whatever you have, but if we're unable to use what you have, we could potentially use my rifle. And I let them shoot my 300 PRC, and this rifle, it's made so well. I mean, the muzzle brake on it makes the recoil very, very manageable. I would say it's like comparable to maybe that of a 308 and potentially a little bit less recoil. I mean, it's amazing that the way this system is made. Um, but I've honestly, I would not be able to tell you how many kids I've had utilize this rifle. I've had children use it. I've had friends use it, and my my system that I have has been very, very well used. I've
Yeah.
had, golly, I think in one youth camp I had 3 kids shoot deer with that rifle in
Yeah.
a 1 week period, and every single one of them were like, "Oh my gosh, I want one!" And it's always the coolest thing being able to be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you shot your first animal, congratulations!" Just some short stories with it. I had one kid shoot his first deer at about 300 yards. And I remember getting them lined up. I had a nice little tripod set up, set the rifle on it, explained to him, hey, once the safety goes forward, you're hot. When you pull that trigger, it's going to go off. And I remember he saw the deer and saw it through the scope. And he's super excited. He's wiggling the tripod around, wiggling the rifle around, and he just looks at me and he's like, "Can I blast him?" And I was like, "If you're on his shoulder, absolutely, man." And so he's like, "I'm on the shoulder." He shoots and he drops that thing like a sack of potatoes. And I remember that thing literally went straight down into the ground, fell behind a bush, and I was like, "Dude, you smoked him." He's like, "Can I see?" And I'm like, "He's behind a bush." And he's like, "I don't see the deer. I don't see the deer." And I'm like, "Because you dropped him in his tracks. He did
I
not
died with his
walk
tracks.
anywhere." Another one, my supervisor at the time, he's currently now the assistant director for the field operations division. Officer McFarland, or he used to be Captain McFarland back then. He had a youth hunter that did not have a rifle that was quite set up for longer distances, and I was like, "Hey, the two kids that I had, they already killed with this rifle. If you want to use it, please go ahead. Let him go ahead and bring it out there." And he was like, "It was the coolest thing ever." He's like, "I ranged initially 400 yards. The girl was getting set up to shoot, and something happened where there was like a little sound that was made. The deer went to them or something and started running off and it ran 200 yards." And so he was like, "I didn't have enough time to go ahead and rearrange." He's like, "But I could tell it was probably about 200 yards. I just turned the turret on the top, turned an additional 200 yards." She shot her first big game animal she ever shot at 600 yards, center punched it and dropped it. I mean, the rifles are they make it very hard to miss. That's what I'll say. And
There's a lot of truth to that. I love those stories. I love it when you send me pictures of the kids doing well. I know you're enjoying it.
oh yeah,
And that is a great system. It's the Huskama based system. That's what we primarily do here, not solely, but we certainly buy into the Huskama system that you've come to love and appreciate as well. So good stuff. Seth, thank you for joining me again this morning. It
yeah,
was a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and your insights. Anything, how, what do we need to wrap up with? I think we'll put some links into the description for this episode regarding becoming an officer, any recruitment links you might have,
absolutely.
and anything else before we part.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a game warden for the state of Arizona, the best advice I can tell you is just to ask a game warden, find out ways to get involved. I mean, you can go through our website, look up how to volunteer, and that's a great way to get a foot in the door. I'll send all the links of potential degree requirements, emails, so you can ask questions if you have questions about becoming a law enforcement or becoming a game warden. All that will be sent to Paul. And as always, if you guys have any questions about anything, I'm more than happy to answer. Any game warden I know is basically an open book. So the only bad question that you have is the one that's not asked. So
Great, great. So can we put your email address in the description as well?
absolutely,
And people can email you if they have questions?
absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Great. Well, hey, man, thanks again.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Great
Thanks, Paul.
discussion. We'll have you on another time. Hey, everyone. That is the Bloodline Podcast by Precision Hunting Supply. My name is Paul. Seth Shear with me today. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time around.